Well, this is a first. My guest is an author, a speaker, and a legal drug dealer. Jennifer Sands has been a pharmacist since 1989, 20 years. But that career is very part-time these days. She is in demand as a speaker because people need what Jennifer has found, a treasured faith. Jennifer, welcome from New Jersey.
New Jersey, yes.
And you can talk like that, but you don't.
I try not to. I try not to talk like I'm from New Jersey.
It is a treat to have you here.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
And, you know, we have to start at a very, very difficult place. I'm not even going to show the image again. None of us want to see it. September 11th,
Yes.
2001. You say a happily married pharmacist became an angry widow. Could you take us to that day?
Yeah. It was a day that my entire life was transformed in every aspect of it. It was a Tuesday morning, as most people remember. My husband, Jim, worked on the 103rd floor of the World Trade Center on the North Tower. And he had a very long commute to work. It took him 2 hours to get from our home to Manhattan. So every morning when he left, I would pray for God to keep him safe. And I did indeed pray that morning, about 6 o'clock in the morning when he left. And then it was about 9 o'clock that morning when I called the pharmacy where I work just to check in with them, because I had off that day, but I had worked the night before and I wanted to see if they had any questions from some things I had left. Anyway, that's when I was told that a plane had just hit Tower 1 just minutes before, and I couldn't believe what I heard. And then I turned on the television and I couldn't believe what I saw. It was like the end of the world. Well, it was the end of my world.
You had been married 5 years.
5 years,
We have a
yes.
wedding picture.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah, there it is.
Picture.
We were very blessed with a strong, healthy, loving marriage. I wouldn't trade one day of that. But, you know, the devastating, angry part came because in my heart, I didn't pray to Osama bin Laden every morning to please not attack our country. I prayed to God every morning to please keep Jim safe. So my anger was completely directed at God. I took it very personally.
Now you pray to God.
I prayed to God, but he was just a vague, impersonal force to me back then. You know, my knowledge of him was very superficial, very, very short-sighted. To me, he you know, it was a generic type thing, or the Santa Claus thing. You know, you pray for it and you get what you want, or, you know, and I really only prayed to him when I wanted something or needed something. Otherwise, I kept him on the sidelines. And but I had no knowledge of Jesus, no understanding of Jesus. I had never read the Bible, never owned a Bible, never had any interest in any of that, and never understood my need for Jesus because I didn't really think that I was a sinner. You know, I knew I wasn't perfect, but I was looking at my sins through the eyes of the world instead of through the eyes of God, and I didn't think I needed Jesus, and I didn't want Jesus. So I just assumed that since I believe there is a God, and since I'm a relatively good person, that God would never let anything bad happen to me in this life or the next.
Wow.
Which is why I was so angry.
I'm sure you're not alone in
No.
that theological perspective.
I think a lot of people have that same feeling, and sometimes they're afraid to verbalize it, or they're, you know, it's being angry with God is just that's a taboo thing. But you know, the Lord just, he wants us to be honest with each other and with ourselves and with him. And by being angry with God, I came to a point when I realized that being angry with God means that I still believe there is a God. Otherwise I couldn't be mad at him. You can't be mad at someone who doesn't exist, right? And that was a huge revelation to me.
Things were happening spiritually long before this day. But I just want to highlight your loss in some pictures of as you say, a happy marriage, a loving relationship. Scuba diving was one of the things you and Jim loved to do. Yes,
we shared a passion for scuba diving, and Jim was also an underwater photographer. And so we spent a lot of time underwater together. And had always had a dream of living in Grand Cayman, one of our favorite places to dive, and starting our own dive business down there, teaching and instruction, doing dive instruction.
Wow, what a neat way to spend your time.
Yes, it was.
There you are together.
Yes.
No wonder, angry, torn away, too early.
Devastated.
Your dreams shattered. But you have a wonderful family. How did they figure in this story?
Oh, God blessed me with the most amazing family. my parents, my sister and husband and their kids, and my brother and his wife and their daughter, just really held me up and calmed me down. They really prayed for me for so long. My sister and her husband had been praying for me to come to the Lord for 30 years.
30
years. It took 9/11 to bring me to my knees, but you know what? Sometimes God answers prayers in days, and sometimes He answers them in decades. But He always answers them according to His perfect plan and His perfect timing.
So how did you move from anger and despair to, well, I'm going to quote you, "The most valuable riches are found in an empty tomb and on the pages of the Bible"? You were biblically illiterate.
Completely
at 9/11.
biblical illiterate. Spiritually ignorant, completely biblically illiterate, and wanted no part of it. But the Lord, in that first year after 9/11, He really just brought a lot of different people into my life, not just my family, but even just complete strangers that came into my life. Some of them came just for a brief fleeting moment and I never saw them again, and others came into my life and have remained there. And they helped me to understand the role that suffering plays, and of course, many of them explained to me who Jesus really is and what He's done for us, and some of them introduced me to the Bible, and it's just like it says in 1 Corinthians, it was a collective effort. Some people planted seeds, others watered them, but God was causing the growth. God was causing the increase.
I was not just surprised. I confessed to my husband I was a little guilty. I smiled through this entire book. It was such an enjoyable visit with you.
Thank you.
Your personality, the truths you illuminated. This is the third book in a journey.
Yes.
And that's where it begins to make sense. God has been at work in your life through all these years in a profound way. You have pursued Him. This cross is on the cover of a trilogy, all 3 books. What are the other titles?
The first one is called A Tempered Faith, and that's just the story of that first year after 9/11. So you see a lot of that raw emotion and anger and bitterness in the beginning of the book. By the end of the book, you kind of see me making peace with God. The second book is A Teachable Faith, and that's, like the title says, is what God taught me, a lot of spiritual lessons and truths, and you see all that growth, that spiritual growth take place. And now, of course, the third book, the Treasured Faith, which is really about treasure. It's the treasure that we are to God and the treasure He is to us.
We have a picture of you with your sister, one of those who prayed for you for 30 years.
Yes,
I
yes.
love this picture because the joy of the Lord, the joy of answered prayer is, that's a great moment.
Yes, that's pretty much what we look like all the time.
And this cross is very meaningful.
Yes, it is. The cross on the cover of the book, it's not a computer graphic, and it's not, some people think it's the cross that remained after the towers fell. There's a big steel cross at Ground Zero, but that's not what the cross is. That cross was sent to me anonymously by someone who had carved it out of the steel girder from the World Trade Center. It's only 8 inches high. It weighs a ton, and it's the only thing from Ground Zero that I cherish. But when I told my publisher about it, he said, well, that's got to go on the cover of the books. And so it's really become a symbol of the strength and, just how God can bring blessings from brokenness and beauty from ashes.
The cross at your neck.
It's another.
It's pretty special too.
Yes, it is. In my first book, in A Tempered Faith, I wrote about how, a beautiful red rose, single red rose by itself is beautiful, and a crystal vase all by itself is a work of art, but when you put the two together, they make each other shine. So symbolically, I was like a red rose, and Jim, my husband, was the crystal vase, and alone we were lovely, but together we made each other shine. But one day that crystal vase came crashing to the ground and left the rose all by itself, and she was devastated and alone and thirsty and dying and searching for water to live, and I found the living water, which is Jesus, and He gave me life, eternal life, and He holds on to me just like a vase holds a flower. Now, after my best friend Amy had read that story in my book, she found this cross, and it's actually a rosebud in the very center with the leaves extending out to form the beams, and she said, now the rose is not by itself anymore, now the rose is with the cross. And she pretty much summed up my whole testimony with one statement.
Beautiful.